Welcome back, YouTube. Sensei Domino here. I'm a pretty big fan of stories about the Wild West. Frank and Jesse James, Billy the Kid, Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, that sort of thing. It partly grew from me growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, and Hollywood put out quite a few movies about those individuals. I'll show some of them now. You've got Young Guns, the original. Young Guns 2. Probably my personal favorite Western movie, Tombstone. Frank and Jesse James. So when I found out that Wyatt Earp had been a boxing referee, I decided to do some digging. And what I uncovered was an amazing story, I guess would be the best way to put it. And I've spent the last couple months putting together some cards to be able to tell this story. And I would have been able to do it a lot sooner, but I actually had a card that I ordered get lost in the mail. Still hasn't arrived. It was supposed to be here on the 8th, and here we are 22 days later, something like that, and it still hasn't arrived. It's lost. I ended up getting a refund, but I did have to order a new card, so I had to wait for that. But now that I have everything in, I'm ready to share what I uncovered. So let me first start by showing a couple cards. Right here we have the 1956 Topps Roundup. This is called the Showdown, which I'm assuming is showing the gunfight at the OK Corral with Wyatt Earp right here. And so this is the card that I have depicting Wyatt Earp. He actually has sort of a portrait photo in that set, but I wasn't able to find one in the condition that I really wanted, so I ended up just buying that one. And the next one I'm going to show is a participant in the first boxing match that Wyatt Earp refereed. This is Mike Donovan. It was called the Professor. And this right here is a 1910 T220 Mecca Cigarettes Champion Athlete and Prize Fighter Series, Mike Donovan. Looks like it's in pretty nice shape, no creases. The back looks pretty good. So let me put this right here. Let me check the back on this. This is kind of cool. It's got a little comic on the back that you can read if you want to pause and read that. This is another card that I thought was in real nice shape. So I'll put these on the screen and I will begin the story. So, Wyatt Earp, boxing referee. On July 4th, 1868 or 1869, a 21-year-old Wyatt Earp refereed a fight between Mike Donovan, right here, and John Chancey. Donovan won the fight easily, pummeling Chancey throughout the fight and winning via points after 10 rounds. Now, Mike Donovan is a member of the International Boxing Hall of Fame. He's also the son of Arthur Donovan, who was an accomplished boxing referee. He's also a member of the International Boxing Hall of Fame, making the pair the first father and son duo in the Hall of Fame. Arthur's son is former NFL defensive tackle and Hall of Famer Art Donovan. Now, Mike Donovan fought John L. Sullivan multiple times in 1880 and 1881. He also fought Jack Nonpareil Dempsey in 1888. He became a boxing instructor at the New York Athletic Club by defeating Walter Watson for the right in 1884. At the New York Athletic Club, he would teach future President Teddy Roosevelt and his sons to box. Roosevelt would even occasionally spar with Donovan. Donovan also helped James J. Corbett prepare for his famous fight against John L. Sullivan, which Corbett would win, giving Sullivan his only defeat of his career. He was also a pioneer of boxing training equipment. He would use a rugby ball hanging from the ceiling, a precursor for the speed bag and double end bag, to work on his hand speed. So that's Mike Donovan. The other participant in that fight, John Chancey, also has an interesting story. Now, John Chancey knew Wyatt Earp when Earp was a teenager and once trained with him. He also introduced Wyatt Earp to Doc Holliday. Now, the date on this is kind of sketchy. I saw somewhere between, I've seen 1876, 1877, 1878. Let's just call it 1877. So in 1877, while in pursuit of Dave Rudabaugh, which you might know the name Dave Rudabaugh from Young Guns 2, Christian Slater's character was called Arkansas Dave Rudabaugh. Now, from what I understand, Arkansas Dave is a Hollywood made-up name. He was never called Arkansas Dave, but this character that he played was Dave Rudabaugh. So, in 1887, while in pursuit of Dave Rudabaugh, Wyatt Earp stopped into a saloon in Texas owned by John Chancey to see if he knew where Rudabaugh might be. Chancey told Earp that Rudabaugh had been in town a few days before, but did not know where Rudabaugh was headed. Chancey suggested that Earp should seek out Doc Holliday, who had played cards with Rudabaugh. Holliday gave Earp info about Rudabaugh's possible whereabouts, which Earp telegraphed to Bat Masterson, who was able to use the information to track down and capture Rudabaugh. Now, a little bit about Dave Rudabaugh, who's also an interesting character. It is rumored that Rudabaugh taught Holliday how to use a pistol, and in turn, Holliday taught Rudabaugh how to play cards. He was also the only outlaw who encountered Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Bat Masterson, Billy the Kid, and Pat Garrett. He also knew Curly Bill Brocious and Johnny Ringo. He joined a gang with Billy the Kid in Fort Sumner, New Mexico. He joined up with the Clantons, and he could have possibly been present when Morgan Earp was murdered, as well as during Virgil Earp's attempted murder. So Dave Rudabaugh was a well-traveled outlaw. So that's the story of the first boxing match. Mike Donovan basically pummeled John Chancey. That started Wyatt Earp's career. Let me go ahead and leave Wyatt Earp in the frame, and I'll start talking about the next fight. The fight that Wyatt Earp would become known for didn't happen until, I believe it was 1896. Yeah, 1896. And that fight would be between Bob Fitzsimmons and Tom Sharkey. All right. Now, to give you a little bit of information on Bob Fitzsimmons and Tom Sharkey, and then I'll explain the cards. So Bob Fitzsimmons is an International Boxing Hall of Famer. He was a first three-time division world champion. He was known for beating Gentleman Jim Corbett, who is known as the only man to ever beat John L. Sullivan. He's also in the Guinness Book of World Records as the lightest heavyweight champion in history, weighing just 165 pounds at the time that he won the title. His unofficial record was 69 wins, 57 by knockout, 12 losses, 14 draws, and 9 no contests. He was considered one of the hardest punchers in boxing history. In 2003, Fitzsimmons was ranked number 8 on Ring Magazine's list of 100 greatest punchers of all time. On January 14, 1891, he won his first world title beating Jack Nonpareil Dempsey in the 13th round to become world middleweight champion. Fitzsimmons knocked Dempsey down at least 13 times during the bout. In 1896, Fitzsimmons won the World Heavyweight Championship in a fight against Peter Mahar. On March 17, 1897, he knocked out gentleman Jim Corbett in the 14th round, a fight that was filmed and released in theaters, becoming the longest film ever released at the time. In 1899, he fought James J. Jeffries, lost by 11th round knockout, losing the World Heavyweight Championship. In November 1903, Fitzsimmons made history by defeating World Light Heavyweight Champion George Garnier by a decision after 20 rounds to become the first boxer to win the title in 3 different weight divisions. In 1907, at the age of 44, Fitzsimmons fought Jack Johnson, who was a much younger fighter. Johnson would knock out Fitzsimmons in the 2nd round. His solar plexus punch would become legendary, although Fitzsimmons himself never called the punch the solar plexus punch. So that's a little bit about Bob Fitzsimmons right here. Now this card right here, this Bob Fitzsimmons card, this is the 1910 E75 American Caramel Prize Fighters card. For a 1910 card, this card is absolutely gorgeous. Love the condition of this card. I also picked up another Bob Fitzsimmons. This one's actually graded. This is a 1948 Leaf Bob Fitzsimmons. Just look at that card. I know the centering is bad. But this thing has like sharp corners. It's crystal clear, bright white. There's not really any sort of white spots or anything in that blue. Nothing. Look at the back. It is super clean. So I don't know about you, but I love this 4.5. Super happy to have this in my collection. So that's the other Bob Fitzsimmons I picked up. Perfect. Fits in the frame well. Now let me tell you a little bit about the other fighter, Tom Sharkey. Tom Sharkey is also a member of the International Boxing Hall of Fame. He would join the U.S. Navy shortly after arriving in the United States from Ireland, quickly being promoted to Master-at-Arms. Sharkey had a blue star and battleship tattoo right across the front of his chest. He also started his career with 20 consecutive knockouts. Now, his career would only span from 1893 to 1904. He had an unofficial record of 40 wins, 37 knockouts, 6 losses, 5 draws, 1 no decision, and 2 no contests. He was ranked number 64 on Ring Magazine's list of 100 greatest punchers of all time. On April 16, 1896, he fought his first major boxing match against future Hall of Famer Joe Choinski, who would later knock out Jack Johnson. The fight lasted 8 rounds, with Sharkey claiming victory by decision. On June 24, 1896, he would fight gentleman Jim Corbett. The fight was ruled a draw due to police interference. On November 22, 1898, he faced Corbett again. Sharkey would dominate the fight. At one point, Sharkey would throw Corbett to the ground and pummel him with blows to the body and the head. In the 9th round, one of Corbett's seconds jumped into the ring, violating the rules. The referee disqualified Corbett and awarded the victory to Sharkey. On January 10, 1899, he would face Kid McCoy. Sharkey would knock out McCoy in the 10th round, and in doing so, secured a shot at the heavyweight title held by James J. Jeffries. Sharkey and Jeffries fought previously on May 6, 1898, in a contested 20-round fight. Jeffries won by decision in a very close fight. On November 3, 1899, the two would again fight a memorable bout. This one was over 25 rounds. The match is notable for being the first championship fight filmed for a motion picture. Sharkey would jump out to an early lead, but Jeffries would gain the lead from Sharkey in the later rounds, and the fight was awarded to Jeffries. Sharkey would suffer a broken nose, 2 broken ribs, and his left ear swelled up to the size of a grapefruit. So that's a little bit about the 2 participants in this fight. I also picked up another Tom Sharkey card. Unfortunately, well, this is also the 1910 T220 Mecha Cigarettes champion athlete and prize fighter, Tom Sharkey. Unfortunately, when this one got here, I knew something was wrong, because I also have this Mike Donovan from the same set, and if I line up these 2 cards, look at the difference. I mean, that's like a whole border. That's like a whole border miscut. So I'm guessing that this Tom Sharkey has been trimmed. And because I didn't I didn't want this card to be the only Tom Sharkey I had, I went ahead and picked up this one right here. And I actually ordered a 1901 Ogden's Tom Sharkey before I picked up this one, but that one's the one I talked about at the beginning that got lost in the mail. So this is the one that I found as the replacement. And yeah, this one's the what is this? The 1908 Ogden's Pugilists and Wrestlers Tom Sharkey. So let me give you a little bit of a view of this one. This one's a pretty gorgeous card. Just a little bit of staining on the back, a little bit of corner wear, but overall for a 1908 card, I think this is just absolutely gorgeous. No creases, no wrinkles, nothing. Pretty beautiful. This other Tom Sharkey, if it wasn't for being trimmed, it's a pretty nice card. Again, it's crease free. It's got some moderate corner wear, but it's not super rounded or anything like that. For a 1910, if this wasn't trimmed, this was a pretty nice looking card. It's a little bit of faded on the back, but yeah, I think it's very presentable. Sad that it was trimmed at some point in time. Let me go ahead and put that in frame. Let me see if I can do this without getting that glare. There we go. All right. So anyway, let me tell you about the fight between Bob Fitzsimmons and Tom Sharkey, and let me tell you how this fight has basically been lost to time. I don't know. But the fight took place December 2nd, 1896 at Mechanics Pavilion in San Francisco. The fight was promoted as the World Heavyweight Championship after James J. Corbett had vacated the title to act in a play. Although the match was considered illegal under city law, civic and police officials who attended the fight publicly bet heavily on Fitzsimmons to win, much like the public had. Earp, 48 years old at the time, had officiated 30 or so matches, though not under the Marquis of Queensberry rules. The matches he had officiated had used the older London prize ring rules, which allowed bare-knuckle brawling and a broad range of fighting techniques, including holds and throwing the opponent. This fight would be the first fight of national prominence that Earp would be officiating. The fight may have been the most anticipated fight in the United States that year. The promoters of the fight were unable to find a referee that both sides could agree on. Already believing that the fight was fixed in Sharkey's favor, Fitzsimmons' managers rejected all the names presented to them. When Danny Lynch, Sharkey's manager, suggested Earp, who was a close friend of his, the Fitzsimmons camp resisted due to the close connection between Lynch and Earp. Eventually, the Fitzsimmons camp relented just hours before the fight, reportedly because of the large number of paying customers that had paid between $2 and $10 for a ticket. Earp initially refused to officiate the fight, but eventually agreed. Not long after both sides had agreed to Earp as the referee, rumors started that Earp had agreed to fix the fight in favor of Sharkey. Martin Julian, Fitzsimmons' manager, entered the ring before the bout and demanded that Earp be replaced. Earp offered to withdraw, but Sharkey's team insisted that Earp was the right choice. Before leaving the ring, Julian turned to reporters sitting ringside and said to them that Earp had been bribed. Earp entered the ring carrying his .45 caliber pistol in his coat pocket. A police captain watching the match ringside climbed into the ring and demanded that Earp hand over his pistol, which Earp immediately handed over to the captain. He later had to appear in court to face a charge of carrying a concealed weapon. He was ordered to pay a $50 fine. A clever tactician with devastating punching power, Fitzsimmons was taller and quicker than Sharkey and dominated the fight from the opening bell. In the 8th round, Fitzsimmons hit Sharkey with his famous solar plexus punch, an uppercut that struck an opponent below their heart and could leave them temporarily helpless. The two fighters were punching at such close quarters that virtually no one could see the punches that the two fighters were exchanging clearly. As Sharkey was falling, Fitzsimmons hit Sharkey in the jaw. Sharkey hit the mat, clutched his groin, and rolled on the canvas screaming foul. Sharkey's manager, Lynch, entered the ring and immediately argued that Sharkey had been hit with a low blow. As Fitzsimmons stood by, amused by what was taking place, Earp conferred with both corners for about 30 seconds. Earp ruled that Fitzsimmons had hit Sharkey below the belt, a violation of the Marquess of Queensberry rules. Earp's decision disqualified Fitzsimmons, and Earp handed the $10,000 check to Sharkey's second. Earp's ruling was greeted with thunderous boos and catcalls. Very few people in attendance thought that the punch Earp had called was a foul. Sharkey's attendants carried him out of the ring limp as a rag. The public loudly protested the decision, and it was widely believed that there had been no foul, and Earp had bet on Sharkey. The public had bet heavily on Fitzsimmons, and they were livid with the outcome. Earp quickly exited the ring and left Mechanics Pavilion, and he would never officiate another prize fight. Sharkey's manager, Danny Lynch, attempted to cash the certified check the day after the fight, but Fitzsimmons had obtained an injunction against distributing the prize money to Sharkey until the courts could determine who was the rightful winner of the bout. The bank manager told Lynch that he could not pay the check until the issue was resolved in court. Earp was vilified for his decision by the public and popular press. The stories were reprinted nationwide. The San Francisco Call lampooned and scrutinized him, running a number of extremely critical stories about him. They challenged his integrity, questioned his honesty, and accused him of having a financial interest in the outcome. The image and attacks by the press would dog him for the rest of his life. Newspaper accounts and testimonies over the next 2 weeks revealed a conspiracy among the boxing promoters to fix the fight's outcome. The San Francisco Call reported that Dr. B. Brooks Lee, who treated Sharkey shortly after the fight, was not a legitimate physician. Oakland Judge Sanderson took testimony beginning December 9th. So before I get into the rest of the story, I want to show one last thing that I picked up. And this is an old magazine from between 1959 and 1960. This is called The Veteran Boxer. True fight stories and rare fight photos. Price 35 cents. And it has the cover story of this fight. Wyatt Earp, Tom Sharkey, Bob Fitzsimmons. And inside, there's actually a telling of the story that was recounted by Bat Masterson himself. So, I'm pretty excited to be able to get this into my collection. Not only that, but there's other really good pictures in here. There's some pictures of Jack Dempsey, and let me see if I can find something in here. There's Jack Johnson. There's Choyinski and Corbett. So there's some really cool photos in here. There's a Dempsey and Gene Tunney. There's a Kid Herman Joe Gans story. Oh, look at this one. Tell me that guy didn't get laid out. Look at that photo. So, this is in very good shape. It doesn't have any tears or anything like that. Here's a story right here. My fight with Jack Johnson. There's a fight right there. Jack Johnson, and I think this is Stanley Ketchel. There's another right there. Johnson Kaufman. So yeah, this is really kind of a cool thing to look at. Show you a little bit more of this before I get back into the story. There's another Bob Fitzsimmons fight. And here's the story right here, the end of the championship dispute. This is recounting the fight against Jess Willard where Jack Johnson gets knocked out. And on the back it's got a VBA members on parade photo. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you real quick. And then I can finish the story. Let me get all these mine back up. All right, newspaper account. Okay. All right, so here we go. Dr. D.D. Lustwig, a San Francisco physician and National Athletic Club medical examiner, testified that he attempted to visit Sharkey in his dressing room immediately after the fight, but was not allowed access. He said he was only allowed to visit Sharkey the next day, along with 5 other doctors, including Dr. B. Brooks Lee. They found cuts and bruises on his head and swelling and discoloration in his groin. A story the Sacramento Daily Union reprinted from San Francisco reported that the swelling and discoloration could have been caused by injecting any irritating fluid. When the other doctors learned that B. Brooks Lee was not a legitimate doctor, they resubmitted their examination of Sharkey, concluding that he didn't suffer an injury that might have caused the end of the bout. On December 10th, the Sacramento Daily Union reported that Billy Smith, Sharkey's trainer, had confessed that the 2 promoters, J.J. Groom, J.H. Gibbs, along with Danny Lynch, Sharkey's manager, and Sharkey, had created the National Athletic Club that sponsored the fight. Sharkey and his manager were set up to receive 20% of the net proceeds. Lynch arranged for Earp to serve as referee, who agreed to give the fight to Sharkey the first time Fitzsimmons landed a close body blow, for which he was to receive $2,500. After the fight, Smith said they took Sharkey to his dressing room and then to his hotel room and noticed no discoloration. As B. Brooks Lee arrived and treated Sharkey in private, Dr. B. Brooks Lee arrived and treated Sharkey in private. When Lee returned to the room, he saw a bottle of potassium iodide. Smith visited Sharkey the next night and noticed that Sharkey's groin had become noticeably swollen. Groom, Gibbs, and Lynch in turn said that Smith attempted to extort additional payments from them. When they refused, Smith went to Fitzsimmons' camp. So what we can take from that previous testimony is probably shaky at best, especially if he was trying to extort extra money There's no doubt something was going on with this fight. I'm just not sure that Wyatt Earp was paid off. Anyway, Earp testified in his own defense, although he was not included in the lawsuit against Sharkey, the National Athletic Club, and others. He stated that I was offered no money to give an unfair decision. I would not have listened to the proposition of that kind to begin with, and everybody who knows me will not doubt my word. Judge Sanderson finally ruled on December 17th that hearsay evidence about the alleged fight was insufficient, that the men engaging in the prize fight were committing an offense against the law, and thus it was not the sort of case for the court to consider. He said the contradictory testimony had not provided sufficient grounds for a decision. He granted the motion of Sharkey's counsel to dismiss the injunction. He said that San Francisco supervisors had no right to license a boxing match, and the license they issued was an illegal attempt to disobey the law. He told the lawyers that the promoters, boxers, and their seconds all broke the law and could be arrested. Sharkey was able to collect $8,500 of his $10,000 purse, but the bank refused to release 15% due to an injunction. Although Sharkey had been declared the winner, he was not widely accepted as the heavyweight title holder. Fitzsimmons would get a rematch against Sharkey on August 24, 1900, winning by second-round knockout. No one can say whether Earp fixed the fight, made the right call, or was simply an unwitting participant in the scam. Earp told the Examiner, "I felt I did what was right, and feeling so, I care nothing for the opinion of anybody. I saw the foul blow struck as plainly as I see you, and that is all there is to it." The judge's decision provided no vindication for Earp. Until the fight, he had been a minor figure known regionally in California and Arizona. As a result of the fight and ensuing scandal, his name was known from coast to coast. In 1905, Dr. B. Brooks Lee, who treated Sharkey after the fight, was arrested in Portland, Oregon. Lee said, "I fixed Sharkey to look as if he had been fouled. How? Well, that is not something I care to reveal. But I will assert that it was done, and that is enough. There is no doubt that Fitzsimmons was entitled to the decision and did not foul Sharkey. I got $1,000 for my part in the affair." In December 1907, Dr. B. Brooks Lee was charged with murder after he was accused of stabbing a man in the eye. Apparently, they had both been attracted to the same woman. In the 1951 edition of Chicago Posse of the Westerners brand book, in the article Wyatt Earp in Alaska, Charles Fernald claimed Earp had told him that iodine had been injected into Sharkey's groin to simulate the injury. Earp added he didn't know about the iodine trick until sometime later. The statement is consistent with Dr. David Lustig, who post-fight examined the injury. Just like the 30-second gunfight at the OK Corral haunted Earp for the rest of his life, the public never forgot his decision in the 1896 boxing match. Earp was dismayed about the controversy that continually followed him. He wrote a letter to John Hayes Hammond on May 21, 1925, telling him notoriety had been the bane of my life. When Earp died in 1929 at the age of 80, he may have been more known for his decision in the title fight than he was for his actions at the gunfight at the OK Corral. His Associated Press obituary and others gave a lot of ink to his officiating of the Fitzsimmons-Sharkey fight. He was also described as a gunfighter whose blazing six-shooters were, for the most part of his life, allied with this side of law and order. After he died, newspapers in the 30s contained references to pulling an Earp, or Earping the job, which served as shorthand for a crooked referee. It wasn't until the release of the 1931 book titled Wyatt Earp, Frontier Marshal, a glowing biography that Earp's reputation began to change to the Wild West legend that he is often seen as today. Earp's connection to the Fitzsimmons Sharkey fight, and even the fight itself, has largely been lost to time. So, other than me stuttering through a couple sentences, hopefully you got a good picture of what actually went on in that fight. If you don't know about the fight, I highly encourage you doing some research for yourself. But what do you think? Do you think Wyatt Earp actually knew about the fix going into the fight? Do you think he was an unwitting participant? Do you think he was paid? Do you think he wasn't paid? I'm curious to know your reaction about that. Me personally, I almost think because he was hired the day of the fight, I don't think he knew anything. I definitely think there was a fix. When you hear about Dr. B. Brooks Lee, and you know, there's several accounts that say that he actually injected something, iodine, whatever it was, into Sharkey's groin to make it look like he was actually punched. And from what I understand, the doctor of the athletic club said that he wasn't allowed to get into the locker room right after the fight. Why is that? Was B. Brooks Lee actually in there treating the injury to make it look like he had actually been hurt? You know, that's interesting to me. You know, then you have the Sharkey's trainer that you know went over to Fitzsimmons' side after he couldn't extort other money, and he mentioned in his testimony that when he saw Sharkey after the fight, it didn't look like he had been hit in the groin. And after B. Brooks Lee had actually tended to Sharkey, he noticed that there was potassium iodide or something on the nightstand. You know, that tells me that something fishy is going on. And not only that, you know, when B. Brooks Lee got arrested several years later, he flat out admitted to taking money to make it look like, you know, Sharkey had actually been hit in the groin. So, you know, I guess it comes down to, do you think Wyatt Earp actually knew about the fix? If he didn't, then, you know, the fact that this dogged him for the rest of his life, you know, that's sad. You know, that's a tragic story. If he actually knew about it, you know, does that change your perception of how you feel about Wyatt Earp? And what do you make of the fact that this story, and even Wyatt Earp as a referee, has basically been lost to time? What do you think of that? I mean, I find that interesting too. I had no idea. And I happen to be looking up, you know, I just generally look up, you know, boxing sets from the early 1900s, you know, trying to find a bargain on a Jack Johnson or a James Jeffries or something like that. And I happen to find this Mike Donovan card. And in the title, it actually said, "In a match refereed by Wyatt Earp." And that's kind of how I found out about it. And then, you know, I started digging deeper, because that Mike Donovan fight, you know, I mean, it's an interesting story, but it comes nowhere close to the Sharkey Fitzsimmons fight. That Sharkey Fitzsimmons fight is some controversial stuff. So anyway, I'm curious to read your comments after this video. I hope you enjoyed this. It certainly took quite a while to put all of these cards together so I could actually tell the story, and I'm really excited to be releasing this video. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.